Welcome everyone to RC number 8. Today should be a short one, but I made this video kind of sort of spur of the moment because I had two students in a row ask me about this exact issue. And I haven't really had to address it very much because most people who come to me again are a self-selecting group. They've done a certain amount of RC training and you've been exposed to structural reading. But I guess there's a number of you out there who haven't really you may have heard of it, but you haven't really heard how to practice getting there. So that's what this video is about. So what we're going to do today, if you've studied RC at all, like I've been saying, you've probably at least heard of the importance of what is called structural reading in the industry. But how can you train yourself to do it? First, I think we have to begin the conversation by specifying, at least for me, exactly what I mean when I say structural reading. So the long and short of it is, we'll start with content reading, which is of course not structural reading. This is how school has trained us to read under most normal circumstances. You kind of just read something from start to finish. You don't really skip anything. Everything is kind of important. The focus here of this style of reading is picking up on the data that is contained in the reading. What actually was said is really important. The result is that once you do a normal sort of content reading, you can answer questions like, what is concept X? Structural reading, though, is quite a bit different. So rather than reading normally, you end up reading a little bit like a jerk, and I'm being kind of serious about that. Not kind of, I am actually quite serious about that, and we'll go over specifically what that means. But really, what that means is that it's possible to skip past blocks of text if that helps. You don't have to actually read everything to pull off structural reading. The focus is not on what the author is on what the author does with the data, not what the data is. Again, because I flubbed that line a little bit, the focus is on what the author does with the data, not what the data actually is. You can answer questions with structural reading, like what logical goal does concept X help the author achieve? Note that we don't actually care what concept X is in this case. All we care about is what the author does with it. So what exactly do I mean when I say read like a jerk? Well, this is the hostility concept that I've talked before in LR and RC. I'll try to remember to leave some links to that up in the corner there for you to follow and see those videos if you haven't yet. But socially and academically, we've been trained to hear people out. We tend to listen under the assumption, at least in learning settings and academic settings, that the people talking to us have a point, and most, if not all, of what they're telling us is somehow going to be relevant or somehow in service to making that point. Understanding their point is the goal. How they take us to that point is often of little interest to us. So hostility / reading like a jerk is what we do when someone we distrust talks to us. Now, imagine someone real slimy, someone you really, really don't trust, is slithering up to you, whispering stuff in your ear. Maybe it's gossip about someone close to you, or maybe it's empty flattery. In your head, if you don't trust this person who's talking to you, your reaction might be as follows. In the case of gossip, you might be telling yourself, clearly this scum wants me to believe X piece of gossip, so I distance myself from Y person. In the case of empty flattery, when you know they're just sucking up to you, your reaction might be, clearly this scum is buttering me up with X piece of flattery. I wonder what they are trying to get me to do for them. What do they want from me? Note how in both reactions, the truth, falsity, or otherwise any characteristic of whatever piece of data X is, it isn't key. In fact, if you hate listening to that person enough, it actually won't matter at all what X is. Rather, the key is you trying to figure out what the slimy person is trying to do to you with X. How are they? Why are they trying to? How are they trying to use this to twist the way you're thinking? That sort of thing. So our conversational reaction to these slime balls is markedly different from what happens when we listen to people with our normal baseline academic / social respect. Instead of really trying to listen to what the slime balls is saying, we put our defenses up and try to figure out how they're trying to manipulate us. So when what little patience we had with this person quickly runs dry, we'll start cutting them off with curt questions like, so what? What's your point? Why does X matter? Why should I even care about X? What do you want from me? What is the point of all this? These questions all downplay the content of the slimeball speech, which is the probably false gossip or empty flattery that they're throwing at you, and instead it demands that they reveal the structure of their speech, what they are trying to accomplish with all the nonsense you don't feel like listening to. So again, it's not what has been said, but how that stuff is being used. That's really what matters. As you might be able to imagine at this point, having a similarly structure-focused approach can make RC passages a lot less intimidating. Suddenly, it doesn't really matter what super complex detail X is. It really doesn't matter what that is. Since all you care about is that the author offers super complex detail X as an example of why new theory Y succeeds where traditional theory Z failed. So again, all these individual things, X, Y, and Z, we don't even need to know what they are to pull off a proper structural reading. But what I've described here is a structural reading. We figured out, we've seen things as separate components that the author has kind of pieced together to try to make some point. So really what it comes down to here, the point of this video, is how can you read like a jerk? If you've been cursed with a lot of slime balls in your life, or if you just have trust issues and distrust almost everyone, just start applying that skeptical, get-to-the-point attitude to RC passages. I'm not going to pretend like the things and the hypotheticals that I just talked about are at all creative on my part. I am simply describing a reality of life that so many of us, probably close to 100% of us, have experienced at some point. It's nothing, groundbreaking or new there. So for the rest of us, for those of us, though, who haven't had a whole lot of actual practice doing this stuff, though, rather than alienating everyone we talk to by treating them like the slime balls that I described, make a little time every day to practice just questioning yourself. An easy place to start is to make a small, humble inventory of your beliefs. It doesn't have to be a complete and exhaustive list. This is not a huge self-discovery journey that I'm talking about. Frankly, just one at a time is enough. Select one belief that you've been able to find, and then just ask yourself a very simple question: why you believe that. And again, this isn't to question the validity of your beliefs per se. This is just a mental exercise to get you to see processing versus data itself. So again, another way of talking about content reading versus structural reading is content reading is data-based reading, and structural reading is data processing. And those two things are different. So this again isn't to question the validity or value of what your beliefs are. This is just simply to practice processing that belief. So then ask yourself, why do you believe it? What data, if anything, forms the basis of that belief? Now take a closer look at the data itself that you came up with. Simply ask yourself, does that data really matter when it comes to your belief? Is it actually relevant to your belief? Or are you making a number of other assumptions to connect that data to the belief? And again, the point of all this isn't to force you to question all your dearly held beliefs. Rather, the goal is to practice looking at a belief or a conclusory statement and not simply assume it has value, and instead looking at the data supposedly backing up those beliefs and conclusions, and likewise not simply assuming that they are unquestionably connected to those beliefs and conclusions. Perhaps a more simple way of looking at it is the result. The result that you want from this exercise is that ideally, instead of just accepting everything you read as some sort of unquestionable conclusion Z, you will begin to see things as, oh, person W thinks fact X says positive thing Y about conclusion Z. So again, this all is, just like most LSAT instruction, a lot more difficult to explain than to actually do. I'm using a lot of words here, but it's a very simple concept. A structural reading will help you see all the different pieces, and instead of just leaving them as separate different pieces in a messy little pile on the ground, you will both see the pieces and how they relate to each other. That's the key. You will see both the pieces and how they relate to each other, and the advantage of this approach is, first of all, you'll find purpose questions. The author does X for what purpose? Those questions become extremely easy once you begin reading like this. But aside from that, the real big advantage that I find for most students is that it really doesn't matter what W, X, Y, and Z are in this example. It really doesn't matter. Of course, it helps. It helps your comprehension if you have very good, deep knowledge of all, W, X, Y, and Z, exactly what they are. That's great. That's only a helpful thing if it happens. But in the event that you don't know everything that you'd like to know about W, X, Y, or Z, it's still okay. You can still get quite a bit of data, or I shouldn't use the word data, quite a bit of information and mastery over the passage by having this relational approach. Even if you don't know exactly what all the components individually are, seeing them together is kind of what makes it all work. So for your own sanity, I hope that the belief in data practice that I described won't take too many attempts, and generally speaking, it doesn't. Frankly, many of us probably don't even need to practice it very much at all because, like I said, we've probably all met slime balls and treated them mentally in the way that I described, even if you haven't given voice to those thoughts. If you have come across somebody in your life who is just obviously trying to suck up to you to get something out of you and you detect it, this is kind of the natural response that we have. We get defensive and we're like, oh, I mean, they're saying this stuff, but they don't really like me. They don't really care that much about me. They just want something else out of me. And so being able to separate what it is that they're saying from what those words that they're saying to you are, and why those words are being said to you. That's kind of the key to all this. Ultimately, none of this, like I said before, is particularly complicated or hard to understand. It all comes down to capturing that feeling of critical thinking and consistently attempting to apply it to RC passages. I recommend doing up to 3 untimed RC sections with this treat RC passages like Slimeball's approach. Many of you will require less than that. Some of you will get it within 1 RC section, frankly. 4 passages can be enough if you are pretty in touch with your feelings and you have a pretty clear recollection of what it's like to deal with manipulative people. And again, unless you've been extremely blessed, you've probably met at least one of these people sometime in your life who has tried to tell you something that they don't believe, and you didn't believe them either, and that they are giving you praise and empty words because they want something else out of you. And again, that's the key concept, the separation between what are the words being said to me versus why are those words being said to me. That separation is what we're trying to get at. So even though this was a short lesson, I'll still try to sum up everything into a takeaway slide here. The goal, again, is to treat passages kind of like how we treat obviously manipulative people. We are less interested in the facts that such people spew at us, and are instead focused on what they are trying to get us to do, think, and feel with those facts. So again, not what is being said to us, but why it's being said to us. In order to import that sort of natural skepticism and defensiveness that I think all of us are born with to the reading comprehension section, if you already have a solid grasp of how to handle these people, just take that and use it as a filter for RC on 3 untimed RC sections. So as you read, rather than focusing on understanding each detail individually, just be like, okay, so this is, I clearly see that this is detail X. It would be great if I understood it, but maybe I don't. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, doesn't really matter. What is detail X there for? What is it doing here? Why did the author mention it? Did they think that it helped prove this point? Is it just another example of what they were talking about in the intro sentence of the paragraph? Very simple things like that. If you aren't that familiar with the experience of being defensive against manipulative slimeballs, practice questioning yourself about your own beliefs in the way that I described. Take belief X you might have and try to figure out what data Y you think it's based on. Then ask yourself if data Y are really relevant to belief X. Ideally, you should begin to see conversations, arguments, and RC passages, not as just collections of unquestionable truths that you don't really can make heads or tails of, but instead as a suggested relationship between data Y and belief conclusion X. Once you familiarize yourself with that feeling of separation between data and conclusions, try it out on 3 untimed RC sections, as I mentioned. And as I said, it probably doesn't take most people that long to kind of get this going. You usually, I would say on average, I don't want to kind of pre-prime you to think that it should be done in this extent, but I say 3 sections of untimed RC because that's a pretty safe range. Most students somewhere between 1 and 2 fully untimed RC sections kind of get it, or at least they stop asking me questions about it. So that's the closest thing that I can think of as an indicator that they're getting it. And that brings us to the end. So thank you for being here. As usual, all the algorithm stuff, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And of course, as more of you seem to be seemingly more comfortable with, just email me directly if you have any further questions. I'm always open to answering questions. So yeah, let me know how things go, and I'll see you in the next one.